Rose, would you please call the roll for us?
Councilmember Freeman.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee.
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel.
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay.
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker.
Here.
Councilmember Plinsky.
Here.
And Councilmember Russell.
Councilmember Russell called me earlier in the day and said he was going to be about 10 to 15 minutes late.
Thank you.
Okay. Before we get started, I know we've got lots of iPads up here. Does everybody have access to the documents that you'd need for tonight, or do we need to maybe have Rose grab some physical documents for anybody?
I don't have access to it on mine.
Okay. Joyce, are you able to get to yours? Mm-hmm. Okay. Rose, can we get one complete packet? Do you want to give it a try?
Can I have a look?
Sure.
Oh, the iPad expert.
Why don't you take John's place there for a couple minutes and see if you can get them synced up. We are experiencing technical difficulties. But while we're doing that, we'll go to public comments. If there's anyone from the public that would wish to address council this evening before we get started. Okay. We've got a pair of presentations this evening. The first one is our State Route 14 design concepts, draft summary memo reviews. Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Mayor Guard. Yes, tonight we have our SR14 conceptual design study that Parsons Brinkerhoff is going to present. We have some people in the audience that I'd like to mention from the Port of Kamis-Washougal. We have Dave Ripp in attendance, and Bill McCrae Smith is in attendance, and Bill Ward as well. So we appreciate their partnership on this project. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christopher Hemmer and Sina Adams. Christopher is a supervising engineer with Parsons Brinkerhoff, and Sina Adams is a planner for Parsons Brinkerhoff. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Christopher.
So you can get the presentation up on the screen here. I'm going to have Sina hand out some documents that'll help when we get to a couple of the more challenging to see slides.
Good evening. Good to see you.
Think we got it?
For John when he gets here.
Okay.
For some reason, it's not coming up on the screen.
Yeah, that page. So
There we go.
and then we lost it up on the screen there. Yeah, that one. Okay. We can back up to the beginning. Okay. I think we've got it going here. So,
Okay.
again, my name is Chris Hemmer. I work with Parsons Brinkerhoff. We were contracted through a collaborative project between the city and the Port of Kamis-Washougal. The purpose of the project was to examine potential long-term and short-term solutions on SR14 to enhance access and safety concerns at Washougal River Road and in the vicinity of the port property at 27th and 32nd. So we can go to the next slide. So this evening I'm going to touch on the process that we went through, the problem statement that was developed with port and city staff, the conceptual designs that were developed, the screening matrix that we assembled to come up with our recommended alternatives, and then get into our recommendations, an approximate forecasted cost for the recommended improvements, and the next steps to move the project forward. So to date, we began the work in earnest in August of 2011. We met with city and port staff and came up with a problem definition for the project. We investigated the existing conditions through site visits and other background documents, including documents that date back as much as 20 years, looking at interchange ideas out on SR 14. We also brainstormed a number of concepts that tried to address the problem statement that we came up with. Later in the month of August, we held our first design workshop with Washington DOT and RTC for that matter. It was a very good and well-attended workshop with the DOT, and they generally concurred with the concepts that we presented and came up with a couple additional alternatives to consider, which we did. We then went back and did a bunch of technical work on the various concepts, looking at environmental impacts, traffic analysis, and engineering constraints. That took the bulk of September. We met again with city and port staff to discuss how to screen the project, the concepts down, and ultimately came up with a couple recommended alternatives. Following that, we followed up with WashDOT staff, got their concurrence on our recommendations, and prepared our final report. So the problem statement that we developed looked at trying to capture the issues and the concerns out on Washougal River Road and the 2732nd area. And the main key points here are in bold. We wanted to improve freight mobility and safety, improve access for trucks and automobiles into the port lands and underdeveloped properties in the area. Support economic development, and to come up with options that would minimize conflicts or address increasing railroad operations on the freight railroad that we know is coming down the line, and ideally could be phased in over time as funding permitted. In developing the concepts, we had a couple key assumptions. One was that the extension of 27th Street to E Street would be a project that would be moved forward separately and was considered a project implemented in all of our analysis. This is one of the top-rated projects in the capital facilities plan. The second piece was that SR 14 would not be widened beyond the 2 lanes it is right now east of Washougal River Road. That is based upon information that Washington DOT gave us when we met. So touching briefly on the assumed 27th Street extension, we did a little bit of work on checking the feasibility and what that extension might mean. The exact alignment can vary back and forth, east and west, a little bit in terms of how it connects to East Street. This was just one initial concept. The one thing that we found in doing this analysis that hasn't really been brought up with respect to that project in the past is that because of the proximity of the spur line down into the port for the railroad, we'd need to realign Main Street a little bit to make all of the grades and so forth work out in the area. So that's where we got a little minor realignment of Main Street into what is now underdeveloped land.
Chris, you've got a realignment of Main Street itself or the accesses to Main Street?
It would be a realignment of Main Street itself, and then we would need to reconnect the accesses to private properties back to the realigned Main Street, basically extending driveways back out to the new street alignment.
And those aren't shown on the diagrams that we have this evening?
That's
is that
correct.
Okay,
Yeah, this is
okay,
the,
okay.
basic diagram here. So we had a number of alternatives, roughly 8 total. 4 were dismissed early on, or 5 were dismissed early on in our screening process. That was actually a pretty good one.
Whatever you just, there you go.
There we go. So just touching briefly, this just kind of tries to capture the range of things that we looked at, including making interchange connections at 27th in a variety of configurations. Also looking at an interchange at 32nd. These, for the most part, fell out of favor because of what became an apparent need at Washougal River Road to do something more than minor intersection improvements. And as soon as that became a realization in terms of our analysis, the proximity of another interchange to Washougal River Road pretty much eliminated the potential for an individual standalone interchange at 32nd or 27th. And then there's one option that we don't have a picture for that we did just some background evaluation. It was a surface street improvement at Washougal River Road that looked at trying to enhance the operations through unique intersection configuration. It actually made things worse in the long run, and so we didn't spend a lot of time after we that penciled out that way on doing any further work. So we also had 2 alternatives that we're calling with merit. These are alternatives that are couldn't be fully eliminated, or they had good components to them. The first is alternative 1, and this is our local improvements, short-term, low-cost improvement alternative. It looked at expanding Washougal River Road intersection with a double left and making enhancements to the local roadway network in the port property by extending Ford Street. Also improving Addy Road to make it easier for trucks to complete turning movements, and adding an acceleration lane eastbound onto SR 14 from the 32nd intersection. What we found and why it's an alternative with merit is that the port improvements, so all the improvements in and around 27th and 32nd, including Ford Road, showed a lot of benefit to the network, and in fact became a key component of our recommended alternatives for that part of the project. But surface improvements at Washougal River Road didn't really pencil out in our opinion. We felt that just the performance and of them showed limited longevity. The intersection, regardless of what you tried to do in terms of extra lanes and so forth, really you buy yourself maybe at best a handful of years of performance on that intersection. The other alternative is alternative 7. This is a substantial, what we call a split diamond interchange. It's essentially similar to what's happening on the west end of Washougal on SR 14 right now with the improvements around 6th. It includes frontage roads on both sides of the highway and basically turns the stretch of the highway between 32nd and Washougal River Road into one big long interchange. This performed fairly nicely, but not as well or similar to our 2 recommended alternatives, and carried with it the highest cost. And so while it's on the bubble, we kind of put it on the outside. It'd be worth revisiting if there was some energy behind it during future studies. And that takes us into our recommended alternatives. Up on the screen here is the screening matrix. This is what we included in our handout because it's challenging to read. And I have a copy myself because I can't necessarily read it up on the screen. The key things to note on kind of the upper half, which is the environmental analysis, we've shaded in what we call our differentiators in the matrix. And what kind of stood out was that local improvements to traffic operations really started to drive the project. From an environmental standpoint, the impacts associated with any particular design alternative were directly related to the size of the improvements in question. So more road, bigger impacts. But to mitigate those impacts was not terribly challenging or something that would be difficult to obtain, and so we didn't really find that we could screen any of the alternatives out. Particularly when we got deeper into the traffic analysis and determined that we needed to move away from a surface intersection and go with an interchange at Washougal River Road to address the long-term and short-term traffic needs. Jump to the next slide. So the bottom half of the matrix looks specifically at traffic, and what we did is we paired various kind of individual options together into things that we could plug into the modeling software that we use to model traffic on a citywide basis. And what we found is that two alternatives highlighted in green really stood out from the rest in terms of improvements. All the intersections operated better than they do or are planned to do in the future, and are improved upon for today. But more importantly, we looked at total delay. So the amount of time that all the traffic in the city experiences during the I think it's peak hours is what we looked at. And what we found is that alternatives 6 and 8 showed about a 20% improvement to in terms of reduction of delay to traffic, from about 2,500 hours of delay to roughly 1,900 hours of delay. And those two alternatives then became our recommended. And we can jump into those. And so the two recommended alternatives that we have, and these again are in your handouts, so you can see them a little closer, is a conventional interchange, not dissimilar from what you see commonly around, and we're used to in terms of an interchange at Washougal River Road. We saw this because of the proximity of the steamboat landing part as a realignment of SR14 to the north. Squeezing any interchange in over the pedestrian tunnel will be a challenge. It looks like it can be done, but it will be tight and something that needs to be looked at closely as the project moves forward. Also, kind of off the screen here, but a key component of this is that piece of alternative 1 in terms of the local improvements with Ford Street being extended between 27th and 32nd, and the Addy Road freight movement improvements. And the second alternative, and the other alternative that we looked at is one that came out of our meeting with the Washington DOT. This is somewhat like Alternative 7, but takes advantage of the possibility of doing the local improvements in the port and leveraging that local improvement to support the highway and the interchange needs, and not being redundant with frontage roads where a local improvement could be installed instead. This alternative puts ramps at the west end of Washougal River Road and then connects through with frontage roads between Washougal River Road to 27th. Advantages of this option are a more direct connection to 27th and the vacant land and development opportunities in that specific area. Direct access of freight from the highway into the port property. And the potential to actually extend the north-south running part of the local street network down to the frontage roads that would provide additional connections from at least the railroad tracks south down to the SR-14 area and then access to the highway. Kind of the cons against this, or the negatives, are it's a lot more roadway as part of a project, and with it associated costs. So speaking of costs, we did some preliminary conceptual level estimating. So while there's a single number up here, think of it in terms of a pretty broad range. We attempted to inflate it out to a design and construction year, looking at close to the end of the decade for construction. Alternative 6, which was the more conventional interchange at Washougal River Road and the Ford Street improvements, came in just shy of $39 million. And Alternative 8, the more extensive frontage road improvements, carried with it a approximately $43 million price tag. The other thing we estimated is looked at the 27th Street extension as well, and what that might cost. And that came in at about $15 million, with the bulk of the difference being from earlier estimates on that particular project, being the addition of the Main Street realignment.
Chris, quick question for you then. If I look at, I guess, can you maybe get some additional information for us broken down by, just simply by your estimates adding together in there? The reason for my question, if I look at 38.9 million, 42.8.
Split out, say what the Ford Street is and versus.
Correct.
The interchange and Ford Street and so.
And 27th.
Yeah, we do have that information. I believe it's part of our final report, and we can provide it. I don't have it on hand this evening. It is summed up the totals.
Not a problem. I just want to make sure, so your Alternative 6 and Alternative 8, the numbers that you have up there do not include anything to have to do with the 27th Street extension itself.
That is correct.
So it's completely separate from those, even though they show on the alternative maps.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Wow.
And so, how does this project fit into the capital facilities plan? Conveniently, we've been working on that for the city as well. The 27th Street extension is Project A in the draft capital facilities plan that's undergoing review and revision right now. So we consider that a high priority project, and because it influenced the area, that's why we assumed it as part of the work. This project is really Project C in the list of the capital facilities plan. It has a price tag associated with it in the plan, but it was left vague, and that's why this project moved forward, is to provide some definition to what that might be. And so, next steps are to take these design concepts and start to move them into the state highway system plan, and to better define it in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So that's working both with the Washington DOT and RTC in modifying their plans, and the city's continued discussions with both those agencies at their meetings. Additionally, other than meeting with those agencies, keeping this project on the forefront, seeking funding sources to move the project and advance the project, both the local improvements and to move the project forward on the state level. These types of projects require champions to see that funding sources are sought and chased and competed for, and through those two things, the project should be able to move forward. We built some energy with WashDOT, and they were very open to the ideas as we worked through the process, and excited to see this move forward. They've been watching the process for some period of time, and we want to try to keep that momentum going as time moves forward. And that takes me to the end. I thank you for your time. If there are any further questions or comments, I can field a few here.
Paul?
The 27th Street crossing, did you terminate your model as soon as 27th Street got to E Street? In other words, did you model what you do with the traffic once 27th gets to 32nd?
What we did is, this work actually sat on top of a model that was developed for the capital facilities plan. That model actually looks at the entire city in its entirety, and it lets us kind of put projects in and take them back out, and to see what happens to traffic when that happens. So when we plugged in 27th and our other alternatives and ran a model, we were actually looking at a very broad examination of what happens to traffic.
My concern is that when we talked about 27th, we always talked about an angled crossing, not straight across. And that eliminates that jug handle in Main Street. And it also brings the crossing down essentially at the intersection of 32nd. The problem is that intersection, 32nd and E Street, is the busiest intersection in the city right now. And the development plans, the long-range development plans, basically go out 32nd. So if you take that traffic off 27th and dump it onto E or Evergreen for 5 blocks, in order for it to turn left to go up 32nd, I see a problem. The other thing I'm concerned about is on number 6, how does that fix the ingress egress for the Port of Kamosh-Meshuggah?
The key thing with that piece of it, ingress and egress to the port lands is enhanced primarily by cleaning up the routing for that area. Basically, Ford Street becomes what Addy is on the north side of SR 14, serving effectively serving as a frontage road to SR 14.
Maybe I misunderstood. So if I'm in the port and I'm going to go west toward I-5 in the Port of Vancouver, how do I get from the port onto SR 14?
So if you're in the port and you want to head westbound, you, as is the case today, you use 27th to Addy and then cut across to 32nd and then get onto SR 14 at 32nd. What the 4th Street extension does is it shortens that routing from needing to run all the way down basically to
Index Street.
Index, and then loop around, crossing the railroad tracks a couple times, and take that relatively slow and circuitous routing out of the equation. It's also a bit for outside of the freight perspective, for just traffic in general, that type of routing, particularly if, say, a commercial development were to go in across from the Bi-Mart and so forth, that much out of direction travel is a bit disconcerting to the general public. They just feel like they're going the wrong way for a very long period of time. And so the 4th Street extension short circuits that long routing, provides a more direct route between 32nd and 27th.
And then similar kinds of questions about 8. My own view was that one of the really important issues was to provide ingress and egress, especially egress westbound and ingress eastbound into the port. There's 100 and some acres there that are about to be developed. And the combination of those two pieces, I'll have to spend some time with it, but I don't see how it helps.
Okay, just trying to, in terms of 8 mostly provides improved access to the developed, the properties more or less abutting the 27th Street corridor. Those that are further down into the port on 32nd are fairly well served by the existing intersection. Though WashDOT would like to take the left turns away off of the highway as they represent a safety concern.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no left turn from 32nd westbound.
No, I think he's talking about off the freeway
Off of the
onto
highway.
32nd there is.
Onto 32nd. You have movements both directions. From
Eastbound and westbound.
From 32nd, you do have to loop around using Addy Road. And so both alternatives were exploring ways to shorten that loop around to get back and access the highway. The alternative 8 provides some other enhancements and provides, say, better access for mostly the properties, the underdeveloped properties north of SR 14. We did run into, while we could improve some of the access into the port, it became challenging to really do something spectacular in terms of an improvement.
Paul, I think your point's well taken, and I'm sure that as we get some answers to questions in regard to the other 120 acres and bringing that online and all of the, everything from drainage flow, everything else, I think we're still going to be looking for a creative additional access point to be able to access that without going through the existing streets that are there today. And I think, certainly from the strategic planning that the port has done and all the design concepts, that was, I think, safe to say, a question up to the end of that thing of there's not a great alternative there. Dave?
I was just going to comment, of course, you might agree with me. The extension from 15 to 27 is more of a, as funding comes available. I mean, it's an alternate 6 with a future funding, expanding that, then did alternate 8 where those frontage streets connect into 27 so you have access.
Right, you could actually build a 6 and go to an 8. One of the loose concerns that the DOT had about that type of approach, though feasible, was that once you have a ramp connection to the highway, it's sometimes difficult to take it away and move it, half a mile further up the highway.
Yeah, I just want to say I've been deeply engaged in that capital facilities project myself. And my understanding was that the two biggest problems that we were trying to solve were access to the port and its Steigerwald employment area and the existing employment area. And then in the long term, access up 32nd and Stiles Road into the northeast quadrant of the city for future development. It's certainly true that having the traffic light at Washougal River Road, it's the only traffic light, at least as far as here in Bingen, on SR 14, is certainly a safety issue. But and it's certainly true that the present SR 14 project is going to force some traffic from 6th up to Washougal River Road. So that will add traffic at that intersection. But I'm not aware of any long-term plans for development that would add significant traffic out Washougal River Road and across the bridge and up into the northwest part of the city or due north of the city. And so I'm just a little puzzled by the focus on Washougal River Road. That's all.
Yeah, I think we can, and that intersection is at from a traffic engineering point of view, is at a point of failure. It's at capacity. Even a little bit of additional traffic will put it over the threshold. It is one of the last, or the last, signal out towards Bingen, and it's a goal of the Washington DOT to remove that signal and
Chris, what puts it at capacity?
Generally the number of left turning vehicles. There's too many cars wanting to make a turn, and
Both coming off River Road and coming off Highway 14?
Mostly coming off of 14 in the evening time, and it's forecasted to get worse over the next decade or so. This was, the point about Washougal River Road and why we ended up where we did is it was somewhat of a refocusing that occurred with respect to our meetings with the Washington DOT. Because that intersection shows even a short-term need to be more than what it is today to address traffic. They really indicated that we needed to come up with a solution at that intersection for the long term first before we could entertain what was going to happen at 27th and 32nd. And it is there where we end up, surface improvements couldn't address the traffic concerns at that intersection, and the safety concerns and the real need to remove a signal from the safety concerns associated with a signal on a 60 mile per hour or 50 mile per hour highway.
Well, I went to all of the meetings on SR 14 going back 4 years, and I was frankly absolutely flabbergasted that DOT's modeling stops 3 blocks from the project. They did not look at 2nd Street, they did not look at 6th Street, they did not look at Washougal River Road. They just drew a line 3 blocks from their project and said, beyond that, we don't care.
Well, I think we're in the process of causing them to care, but. Council members, other questions, comments? Dave?
I share Mr. Greeley's concerns about how we arrived at priority over the 15th over 32nd, because 32nd seems to be where the center of mass is and the center of growth is. I understand what you're saying, that there's a need to do something now. I had two questions for you, if I may, real quick. What was WashDOT's rationale for only 2 lanes from 15th to 32nd? Was it the difficulty of getting 4 lanes, or?
No forecasted need in terms of the amount of traffic that will be from Washougal River Road east. The traffic drops down substantially, and their long-range 2035 forecasting doesn't indicate that they'll even come close to needing
Really?
2 lanes each direction.
That's the shocker.
I'm a little surprised at that, but I'd love to see your data.
Jim, if you could check with Don Wagner and find out what their most recent date of any kind of traffic counts are out there on that stretch of roadway.
Okay.
I always trust the data, so I'll be interested in seeing your data.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how old it is, though. Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly not a traffic counter. As you come past
Right.
River Road, I have rarely ever seen more than 2 or 3 cars at that stoplight to turn. Yet cars can be backed all the way up 32nd southbound, excuse me, on the south side of 32nd, from the railroad tracks onto Highway 14, all the way back to 27th Street on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So I just wonder how far back any of those accurate, true count numbers are for what we've built out on the eastern side of the city. Because yeah.
Yeah,
I've said from
counts
day
that
one, I
went
could.
into our model, were updated a year ago. So there are a handful of. Okay. So the counts, I guess, the model I knew was about 5 years old. I thought the counts had been updated for it, but I'm being told no from Sina, who's more involved with the CFP than I am. So the counts are somewhat dated in terms of the.
So
model.
that may help us get some other things done in.
Yeah, and I have to agree with the mayor that the currency of the data is one of the values of the data. Without currency, the value goes down in a hurry. So I'll be interested in your data. Did you get that, Don? I agreed with the mayor.
Stop. Other questions?
Second question, if I may. How does option 8 affect exterior wood, which is at the northwest corner of 32nd and Highway 14? Big lumber yard there. Forest products producer.
Doesn't look like it does. Much.
couldn't
Corner
quite make
of
it
their
out
property
for us.
on the east side, it looks like.
Yeah, let's see if I need to go back to northwest corner.
32nd and Ford.
It's down in here.
Ford.
So,
Just looks like where your realignment on 32nd comes in.
we show somewhat of a sweeping curve that doesn't necessarily end up aligned that way. We went out and looked at that site. That's the site that's being presently redeveloped. And
Yep.
Chris, that's Hamilton site, the
Or
old
is it-
Hamilton site.
Or
Those
we-
were the 27th.
27th and Ford. So we really don't impact anything to the west side of 27th.
How about to the west side of 32nd? That's where exterior
On the
woods.
west side of 32nd, we north.
Yeah, the
So where am I? I guess I'm
northwest. Right there, where you're at.
up there. Okay. Alternative 8, we really don't have any impacts there either. That site actually was one that could be impacted by that alternative 7, which was the broad, full-length split diamond interchange that basically built the entire thing out because of the need to put ramps in between that property and SR 14. But SR 14 actually has quite a bit of right-of-way already dedicated to it on the north side of the existing roadway.
Yep.
It's set up asymmetrically, I assume, so that they could have widened to 4 lanes in the future.
So
And so we do have some room to make improvements out there.
So is that where the frontage roads would appear, would be basically parallel to the highway lanes themselves on the upper side, not down the
Yeah,
lower
yeah.
side?
That's how it's conceptualized.
Okay.
We'd actually scooch the.
To the north.
The highway to the north a little bit to make room so we didn't
So would-
move southward where we have the fall off the embankment, basically.
Would those lanes be north or south of Addy Street?
They'd be south of it.
Everything would remain south of.
See, if you're
Of
south of
Addy
Addy
Street.
Street, you're running right through Exterior Woods logistical area.
It would be between, if we did, say, alternative 7, it would be between the wood company and the existing highway.
Yeah, but you're looking at 6 and 8.
pavement.
You're looking at 6 and 8, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think 6 applies, but on option 8, does that affect that area there?
No.
It's on
no,
existing
it's
highway,
actually,
yeah.
the only option
Okay.
that really could affect that area is option 7.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council? John?
I think this was addressed earlier, but is there a hybrid between alternative 6 and alternative 8? Keeping the diamond interchange at Washougal River Road and then looks like the on and off at 27th.
A hybrid in the sense of creating 2 separate interchanges, is that what you're getting at without
Yes.
frontage roads? It's something we actually talked about, but because the intersections are only about, just shy of half a mile apart, between a third and a half mile, that creates ramp spacing that is too close to safely operate, and so we can't feasibly have ramps that close to one another.
Or DOT standards.
And, yeah, DOT standards dictate interchange spacing of a mile or more.
So even
in urban
32nd,
area.
they would be stretching it to try and do
Yeah,
that.
37th's under, or 32nd to 15th is under a mile. Though it's close, and you might be able to make something work. But again, when we started looking at traffic numbers and so forth, it didn't really
What's
seem
the
to
space
be that.
between Second Street and 15th Street?
Just right at a mile, maybe just, it's about a mile and a tenth.
Mr. Mayor, would it be appropriate to ask the port?
That's, as soon as you guys got done, I was gonna go
Oh,
to
okay.
Dave and the 2 commissioners, so. John?
So are you saying the hybrid is impossible?
What
I know it would be difficult, but is it impossible?
I believe it to be impossible. I believe by the time you draw one ramp up and tried to have the 2, they'd all actually be touching one another, and there would be no distance to properly merge onto the highway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Joe?
32nd Street it gets backed up because of the railroad tracks.
It's not just road tracks, it's primarily the road tracks. It can also be a function of traffic on E Street and that signal light that's there. It all depends
intersection.
on what time you hit it. One after the other of people coming in off 14 won't make it through those cycles.
Have we ever discussed going up and over the railroad tracks at 32nd?
Not at 32nd, because it's not deemed to be enough room. That's why we're looking at the 27th
Okay.
Street
That's actually something that we talked in passing, and because E Street is so close to the railroad tracks at the intersection of 32nd, to effectively bring everything up, you'd end up raising E Street so high that you'd close off many of the accesses into the Safeway development and the service station on the northwest corner and so forth, and so major business impacts associated with trying to make that grade separation work.
Other questions of council? Dave, commissioners, I'm not sure if we've got a separate presentation coming, but I would invite you to.
Trying to envision that interchange at Washougal River Road, is that similar to the one that Is it 192nd in Camas?
I can't picture them on it. 192nd Camas, I'm sorry, I'm not.
It's an
familiar with
overpass that goes over the highway.
Interchange. It would be, okay, and now I'm thinking back.
You exit right.
It would actually be more similar to a 164th in.
Okay. So it'd go
Camas.
under the highway.
So it would go under the highway. Actually, the way we because the highway actually is the
Dike.
flood control dike at that location, we can't actually bring the main road down.
Can't put a big hole in the dike?
And and with the emergency services access so close in on the north side of the highway, we saw basically Washougal River Road staying where it is today, and SR 14 would be brought up and over the top of Washougal River Road to make that interchange happen.
Gotcha. Well, that shouldn't cost very much.
Just
There's a
$39
lot.
million.
Yeah, but there's a lot of roadway there. You could start back a long ways.
1.1 miles.
Yeah.
Hopefully, hopefully. Dave, Commissioner McCurry Smith, any questions, thoughts?
If I could ask also, at 27th Street, you'd be, if you wanted to go west on 14, you'd be turning, and you were going, if you were headed north and you want to go west, you'd then make a left turn onto that.
Right.
Should have that
Right
plan.
here. Yeah, so if you wanted to go west, you would go up 27th and connect onto this blue line, and then that would take you across to Washougal River Road, and then you would get onto the highway at Washougal River Road.
And we're envisioning that those frontage roads would be big enough for some of the larger trucks, everything that's moving in and out.
They would be, all this would be designed, and the improvements on Addy and so forth are designed for the, are
Wide turners.
are there to take care of the wide turning, the biggest of the over the road legal trucks.
Dave?
The other thing that we discussed, you might want to mention, Chris, is the future development of that, those open lots that are off of the frontage road from 27th to 15th heading west. So they're on the north side of 14.
So these,
Yeah.
this, the Pendleton property and we thought, with this type of concept that, connections in and out of that property to the frontage roads would be a possibility. Another kind of direct linkage into that development potential into the highway system.
So what if those frontage roads are basically at the same elevation as what the highway is now? What's the separation between the highway lanes and the frontage roads? Is it just Jersey barriers or something
In this
that?
case, yeah, it would basically be Jersey barriers.
But you would use the level ground that's already to the sides of the highway just to create the additional asphalting lanes and separate them?
Correct, essentially, and then kind of bench into the embankment that's out there right
Right.
now as we drop down to 27th.
Okay. Any other questions? Jim, any?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a few things here. As we discussed earlier on 32nd, the grade separated crossing is definitely problematic. So this maneuver up over 27th and then down East Street, we actually have some STP funds this year to improve that intersection. So we're gonna pull the radius out on 32nd Street, and then up the hill we have on 32nd Street all the way to the city limits in our capital facility plan to improve that one of these days as well. So that maneuver up and out of the city will be important to this whole concept. But I think that's why we get off here and head up that way, just because we couldn't get over the railroad tracks there at 32nd. Also, these radius here on Addy and will be opened up as well for freight mobility. So that's an important aspect of this when you look at circulation in and around this whole area. Also on these frontage roads, if they become DOT's frontage road, access will be limited.
Yeah.
But if we take the frontage road, then we can determine what kind of access we have in there. So there's some things to think about for sure.
Okay, Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just going to add a couple kind of summary comments, feedback to the team, and then for the next steps, I think this alternative 8, at the end of the day, really is the only alternative that we could consider. WashDOT's telling us you can have one interchange here, and according to their standards, it's going to be the first one you get to as you're heading eastbound, and it's almost like a fixed point that we must deal with. The solution in 8 gets us in and out of the port through those frontage roads, and so it takes care of that important criterion that we had, that Councilman Greenlee was mentioning, not as directly as an interchange right there, but it does address it. You would have to go through the port to get out to the further east part in the Steigerwald developments later, or you take your right onto 32nd. We're basically going to bypass the 32nd and 14 intersection and use this frontage road package to do it. It's a little surprising for all of us to see this specific alignment based upon what we had seen previously. Maybe there's some things to do there, but the details of how that will happen will be important. But what this does do, with maybe some refinement, is get us the opportunity now to talk with our partners regionally and with the state so that we are back in priority consideration for future funding for this part of the corridor. And we can start to talk with our legislators both in Olympia and in Washington, D.C. about how we're going to cobble together $60–70 million here over the next decade or so to affect these improvements. So what this will do for us is gives us something to present and to discuss. There can be some refinements, absolutely, that we would need to make, but at least it gets us so that we can be in those conversations a little more legitimately now. With that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and also the coordination with the Department of Transportation and their local representatives. We met with them several times, and they all looked at it, their planners, their engineers as well. So this is something that they like as well. So it's important to have them, actually, since it is their facility, it's important to have them on board as well.
Yeah, it's a key point. We're concepting on their route, but I think it would be critical. One minor fine point that Jim mentioned, I think it would be critical for those frontage roads to be ours. That will open up lots of opportunities north and south.
How real is that possibility that the state would give up that?
I think it's pretty real.
Grant us an easement or whatever we end up going through. I don't see them giving us the property or selling us
If
the
they can get
property.
rid of the maintenance, I think they're on board. But just off the top of my head.
And as long as we've got reasonable separation so that whatever may happen on there doesn't impact their travel lanes and cause another problem that isn't foreseen now.
It wouldn't be an E Street type access program, but you might see a couple there for some significant developments that could happen then.
Yeah, because you've still got to get up to that elevation as well from that,
It is,
from down below.
even if they kept ownership, there's a high likelihood that they would allow
Yeah.
connections into the frontage road, particularly of local streets. They'll be more cautious with private development and the amount of accesses that those developments might have. But in terms of an extension of the existing roadway network, that's something that, in fact, when we met with them, they were open to.
Good. Any final items?
I wanted to say one thing. Once we get more accurate data as far as today's numbers and the traffic patterns that we see today, do you think it's more of a possibility they might consider widening the road all the way through to 32nd?
Of SR 14?
Yes.
I don't believe so. The state was not even hedging a little bit on the need on whether or not the need to widen SR 14 was something that they foresaw before 2035, 2040, and at which point, all bets are off anyways. So they unequivocally said they have no plans to widen, and that for our purposes we could consider SR 14 in all our analysis a 2-lane highway, to the degree that they indicated that this concept of using the existing highway to accommodate the frontage roads, which wouldn't be possible under a 4-lane highway scenario, was something that they advocated to us when we met with them.
So if we were 4 lanes, it would foreclose alternative 8, the frontage road?
Without right-of-way acquisition.
Without acquisition, okay. It's one of the reasons why the 27th flyover, if that's the right terminology, doesn't sweep toward the east as much as we've seen in previous things. Is that a question of real estate and right-of-way as well, or was that?
This alignment was just one that was picked. We actually have 3.
Okay.
3 alignments. One that connects into 27th, one that in a mid-block between 27th and 28th, and one that sweeps over to the east more towards connecting in around 28th. Concerns are started to be developed with respect to the Washougal Lumber Company and their operations there with the eastern sweeping alignment, and so we looked at the feasibility of all 3. They're all equally feasible, though not necessarily ideal in terms of the profile grade.
You've still got some constraints in there. Frankly, I could care less if east of River Road it was 2 lanes or 4 lanes, as long as we've got reasonable access off of that highway in some way, shape, or form. As you come east, even coming off of Lady Island, there's a lot of traffic that turns off on Union. There's a lot of traffic at 2nd. There currently is traffic at 6th. River Road, you get less. It's just a function of where it stops and gets bottlenecked. So, and not even bottlenecked, it gets stopped. Either a train or a red light, so. Okay.
Okay.
Chris, thank you very much. Jim, can you put in your schedule to maybe put together a meeting with ourselves and Parsons Brinkerhoff and the port after the first part of February to revisit a couple things on here, and let's try and map some things out and look at some areas that we may still have some questions on and want to push a little harder on.
Okay, will do.
And potentially even bring in one of Don's folks or somebody from DOT to sit in on that as well. Thank you very much. Okay, going to a presentation on aging readiness. Mr. Barron, welcome. You have some guests with us this evening.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm Bill Barron, Clark County Administrator, members of the council, Mr. Scott. Nice to see you this evening. With me is Oliver Ojaco, the Director of the county's Department of Community Planning, Colette Anderson, who is the lead staffer on the Aging Readiness Plan process that we're going to talk to you about this evening, and David Kelly, who is Director of the Area Agency on Aging, who was a significant partner in this effort. And what we are talking about is an effort over the past of 2011, actually, the past year, where the county Board of Commissioners, Mark Bolt being the divisionary commissioner in this regard, and I think he probably was thinking of me since I'm older than he is, about what we're calling the silver tsunami, and the reality that we have come to the conclusion with our planning process that we are probably not quite ready for as yet. And the plan, the Aging Readiness Plan put together by our Aging Readiness Task Force, which Ms. Anderson and Mr. Ojako will talk to you about, talks about the things that we might want to do as a county, not just as a county government or not just as a city government, but as a county community. Because it is a process, it is an issue, I won't say problem, but it is certainly an issue that we will have to come to grips with that we're not talking about quite loudly enough yet, I think is our conclusion. Ms. Anderson will go through some highlights of the plan. We don't want to take a lot of your time. I believe you have a handout, or at least it will be up on the screen for you to look at. We're not asking for any money. We're asking for your moral support as we move forward. The County Board of Commissioners has not yet decided how to go forward in terms of implementation. Mr. Ojako has put a number of excellent ideas on my desk that we are looking at right now. But we want to work with the cities, we want to work with the special districts, we want to work with the not-for-profits who are already doing some of the good things that are going to need to be done, that are being done, and that will have to be enlarged and expanded. And that's what we're looking for. We have letters of support from the cities we have visited so far, and Colette can tell you about that. And that's all we're looking for. If you feel that our work is appropriate, that it is visionary enough for the citizens of Washougal to take a look at for future development, then we would welcome your support in that regard. Without further ado, if I may introduce Oliver Ojako, who will then introduce Colette Anderson.
Thank you, Bill. And good evening, Mayor Gard and council members. As Bill indicated, my name is Oliver Ojako, Director of Clark County Community Planning. And we are here to provide you just an overview of the recommendations of the task force and ask the council to join county commissioners in approving the plan. And as Bill indicated, why are we here? You know, this is an issue that we went, when I say we, I mean staff, went with Commissioner Mark Bolt in 2009 to a forum put out by at Washington State University that was sponsored by Southwest Washington Agency on Aging and other agencies that participated in that. And that forum really opened our eyes, if you will, on the changing demographic that the county and the state as a whole is going to be experiencing. And from that work session or from that forum, what we learned from experts is that our demographic is changing. The baby boomers are turning 60 and 65 in the coming years. And that's the fastest growing segment of our population. And that ranked Washington State as the number 11th in the nation when you look at those in that age bracket, 60 to 65. And what ESPAD is also telling us is by 2030, think about it, by 2030, that 1 in 4 of county residents will be 60 or older. Now, no one knows where they're all going to reside, but I bet you some of them will be here in Washougal. The other way to look at that is that if when we say baby boomers, we're really looking at those that were born between 1946 and 1964. The question then becomes, are we ready? Because as you know, as we age, our needs also change. And the idea of putting a task force together was, just as Bill indicated, the foresight of Commissioner Mark Bolt to take this issue on and recognize that we have to do something as a community, but gave us the charge with the task force to take a look at what is working currently in Clark County and where are there gaps and where can improvements be made. I'll turn it over to Colette to quickly summarize the recommendations of the task force and the process that we went through. As Bill indicated, we're asking for your support to the county commissioners to adopt the plan. There are some land use issues which I will be discussing with your staff as we move on into our next planning update. What are some of the things that we have to do in terms of land use going forward to address the issues facing elder community, elder population? So, Colette?
Thank you, Oliver.
And I apologize up front, I've got a cold, so if you can't hear me, just raise your hand or something. So in the beginning, and not too long ago, May of 2010, we joined a 25-member task force. It's the largest task force the county has ever tried to manage. And we knew we were in trouble at the very beginning because when you put your press releases out looking for people to volunteer for task force, we had 70 applicants for that particular task force. Normally you get 1, 2, 5. And we began to get a clue that this was a topic that was near and dear to people's hearts and that we really needed to step back and take a very succinct look at it. So the task force was given a charge to basically say, what are we doing well? Where do we need improvement? How do we get Clark County as a whole involved as much as possible in all ages, and to come up with recommendations that allow us to move forward into the future. They also asked a series of questions as they went through their work, and it focused a lot on independence. What am I going to be as the years go on, and am I going to be able to continue to live the best quality of life that I can live for myself, regardless of where I live? So the task force had 5 workshops. We had anywhere from 75 to 100 people attend each one. They were in the middle of the afternoon. That's huge. That's totally unusual for what we're used to doing. We had 5 topics that they reviewed: healthy communities, housing, transportation, supportive services, and community engagement. And what we did is we focused the conversation on that topic. We invited stakeholders in as well as the general public to talk about it. And we went through a series of how are we doing and what can we do better. And as we went through that process, the task force then broke themselves into individual groups and started to resolve how they could come up with individual recommendations. Now I'm going to go through a series of just a snapshot for each of the 5 topics. And the reason for that is that the task force came up with 91 different recommendations. They were both short, medium, and long-term in duration. A short term is like 0 to 3 years and so forth. Some of the recommendations could be applied county-wide if we so choose to do so. Others are more of an option that might work for Washougal, but not Vancouver. There are a menu of options for you to take a look at to see what would work best for your jurisdiction. So what we learned overall was in doing this is that there isn't one size, one fits all category. Everybody is unique. We couldn't just prescribe that we're going to do it A, B, and C. We need to come up with a variety of options. So with healthy communities, it's how does our environment impact our health? Well, it impacts our health in a variety of different ways. The better environment, the more active you are. The more active you are, the healthier you are. The less your medical bills are, the happier you are. How do we take a look at our individual communities to see what can be improved or not? And that's going to be a trick for Mitch and the land use folks to go through and say, is there ways that we can look at Washougal differently to improve the environment that we live in? And it goes back to the design. You've spent a lot of time in downtown Washougal putting in walkable components, putting in mixed-use developments, making places nice. As you expand out into the city, there are things that you've got plans for, whether it's parks and trails and so forth. It's the same concept. And taking another look at it to say, do we need to check in with that? Go ahead. What we found as we were looking at certain sections of Vancouver, and we use them as our technical guinea pig there, that there's a lot of things that the cities are doing well. They have a great park system, a great trail system. That's working great. Some of the things that could be improved upon is the close proximity of grocery stores to where the residential neighborhoods are. Can you get there without a car? So some of the recommendations and strategies involved with healthy communities focus just on doing neighborhood planning, rolling that into your comp plan updates and your different types of plans like your parks and trails plans component. Housing. That was a big topic, not the biggest topic that we discussed, but for the most part, can you successfully live in the home that you are in as your circumstances change over time? Are there things that you can do to your home to make it more agreeable to you, whether it's adding grab bars or lowering your countertops? Can you get in and out of your home without navigating steps that may be an issue for you in the future? We looked at housing stock in Clark County and all the various jurisdictions. How many two-story houses do we have? How much mobile homes do we have? Are the homes, the age of the homes, the older the home, that requires more maintenance and operational costs as you grow older when you have less income is an issue. So we look at the whole gauntlet. So the challenges that we looked at really focused on affordability. Can you stay in that home? And do we have enough choice? At some point in time, you may have to leave the home you love. It'll happen to most of us. But can you make the choice to stay in the community that you've lived in forever? Or are you going to be forced to move? Is there an alternative to stay in Washougal, or are you going to have to go to Vancouver or Portland or wherever? So the strategies for housing focused on those key elements. Some of the things that we're looking at doing is very similar to the Green Building Code, which is an option that the county allows people to build their homes under, is do we also provide an option for people to build under what they call universal design? And that is accessibility options for your particular home. Do we make that incorporated into our system? So that was one of the ideas. The other is to look at our UDC, or Universal Development Code, to say, are we allowing for accessory dwelling units? Is there things that we can do? Are we going to allow duplexes in areas that they're not currently allowed? Look at our housing use list, at least from the county side, and we're going to be recommending that Washougal do the same thing. Are you allowing enough flexibility where you'd like the rental housing to be so that people will have an opportunity to change? Transportation. That was probably the third most controversial of the five. And it all comes down to, we have an auto-oriented society. No matter how hard we try on that healthy community component, we all have a car, we all go some places. We don't have a lot of options to do otherwise. At some point, we lose our license. What are we going to do? This particular component of the recommendations, go ahead, Mitch, you can switch, basically focused on alternative transportation. Where can we go? There's a whole section in there on CTRAN. They were a participant in some of the strategies and recommendations as to what could they do differently. Are there other nonprofits out there? Do we encourage volunteer pools? What are we going to do so people can get from point A to point B? Supportive services, well, that was the #1 topic. What do I need so I can successfully stay in my home? If I need to move out and go into assisted living, are there enough care facilities out there that'll take care of me? What you find is that most of the caregivers are family and friends. It's the way it is. And then we don't forecast to see that changing whatsoever. We've got limited resources. We found that there are quite a few things offered throughout Clark County. One of the comments is that we really don't know that those services exist. One of the recommendations is to put together a centralized information pool so that you can find that information in one spot. If you're looking for housing or caregiving or respite care, that you didn't have to call 4 or 5 different agencies and get centralized pieces of information. So, oh, I jumped ahead, didn't I? Go ahead, one more. Sorry about that. Community engagement, that was the last and 5th workshop, and it focused on 2 key components. One is to encourage the volunteering that we need so much to have happen. What can we do differently to encourage people to volunteer more hours, perhaps? Do we modify some of our volunteer programs to allow more flexibility? And the other one had to do with working. What if you have to go back to work because you can no longer afford to stay home retired? Is there a way that we could assist you in accomplishing that? In other states, they have a program through the WorkSource arena that is senior-oriented. So there's a senior jobs pool where employers can ask for seniors. You can go in and get your skill sets updated. You can do something that you didn't do before, and you can do part-time work, whatever it is you might be. That's one of the recommendations, is to focus on, let's deal with seniors in the aftermarket, because a lot of people will like to continue working, but how do you do that? So that's in total. I went very, very quickly. One more. To kind of summarize it for you, where we are is we're going to our Planning Commission on Thursday, and it's a little unusual for us to do that. However, there are some land use and Unified Development Code strategies in here. And at some point, it's going to be a reference document for our comprehensive plan. Next year, we'll be drafting what we call a healthy communities or health element for our comp plan. And so we're actually taking this through the land use planning commission component, just so that they're aware of the whole umbrella of what's going on in the context of why they're going to be doing bits and pieces next year for the county. And then we'll be at the commissioners on February 7th, and hopefully everything will go well, and we will be implementing ourselves this year. Any questions?
Councilman John?
I would encourage you to include, if you haven't already, I know this was a brief presentation, but a faith-based component in your planning, because I think that's very important as you move forward.
Absolutely.
I've attended, especially the first meeting on healthy communities, and my compliments also to Marilee McCall, who has been part of this ongoing effort also. Mitch can probably correct me if I'm wrong. I remember that we discussed, and I think we moved forward, for example, on additional permitting for mother-in-law apartments and up-downs and things like that, which certainly will help some of this. And I have to say, I don't envy the community development and the public works problems involved in trying to figure out how to create that improved access, improved mobility, and all of the other, especially access to shopping. I mean, our principal shopping right now is a Safeway in one corner of the city, and it's frankly difficult to get to without a car. So a number of things to think about. Thank you.
Other questions, Steve?
First of all, I admire the county for tackling this issue and looking ahead and doing some planning. I look at this issue through rather unusual eyes. When I was 16 years old, I lived in Chorleywood, Hertfordshire, England, outside of Watford. I don't think there were more than a couple hundred people in that town, in that village. And very few people had refrigerators. We rented a house there, and it was called a manor house. Big thing, but it didn't have a refrigerator or a freezer. It also didn't have a lot of electricity, and if you wanted to take a bath, you built a fire in a little coal-fired stove, and 45 minutes later, you could take a warm bath. Things have changed, and the concept that you're talking about, for just as one example, neighborhood grocery stores, as contrasted with supermarkets, and they use neighborhood grocery stores in Chorleywood, and there were only 2 of them. and they were, both of them would fit in this room, and prices were high. Contrast that with today, in England or here. You've got supermarkets, but they're not located in the neighborhood. You have to travel to get to them. So people take cars. They also buy large amounts of food and other provisions, which they have to transport home because they only want to go once a week. They don't want to go every day. When we lived in Chorleywood, we went every day to the shop. That requires a car. Otherwise, you're hauling this stuff back on the bus, or as Lars Larson says, on the choo-choo. And I'll defer my views on that one until later. But in addition to everything else, people travel to get lower prices, and they use cars to do that. So I understand the concept you're trying to promote here. And in urban areas, it works very well. In suburban areas, and this is a suburban area, it appears to me that it doesn't work very well. The other thing I would urge you to consider is having a focus on private organizations do this work. Not necessarily the planning, but supplying the services. Government, God bless us, doesn't do things very well, especially, and the farther out we try to go, the less effective we are. So I admire what you're doing. I admire the group that you've got involved in this. I've seen some of the names in their organizations, but I would urge you to do the planning and then involve the market out there to render the services. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Comments, questions?
That's great.
Colette, Oliver, thank you very much. You've got a meeting coming up on the 19th where you're going towards your planning commission? Right, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, I know we can't take any final action in our workshops, but would any council members have any objections if the city were to craft and forward a letter of support to the county? Thank you very much.
I'd love
Thank
to
you
see
very
it
much.
drafted. I just wanted to thank the county executive and staff for coming to our little city. Thank you.
It isn't a no. I just would like to see it.
Bill, thank you. Colette, Oliver, David, thank you very much. Okay, moving towards Public Works. Jim, professional services agreement with OTAC.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Pull this up here. So, yes, you have before you tonight an agenda bill for a professional service agreement, and that's with OTAC Engineering. And this agreement is necessary to help us to comply with our stormwater regulatory requirements, and specifically with our stormwater management program. So I'd like to just give you a brief overview of our stormwater management program and show you how OTAC Engineering will help us out, and briefly mention a possible funding opportunity for this type of work, and then go in with some links that you could look at if you'd like to do some more stormwater related research, because there's a lot of information out there regarding stormwater. So just a quick overview of our stormwater management program. This is submitted annually with our report to Ecology. It's about a 50-page document, so it's a large document, and it's a written program, and it mirrors the Phase 2 stormwater permit. The stormwater management includes BMPs, and those are best management practices, and these they describe the implementation of these best management practices. That's what the stormwater management program So as I mentioned earlier, the Phase 2 stormwater permit directs the city to organize our stormwater management program to follow each of the permit components. And those are all listed here. Public education and outreach and public involvement requirements, they kind of go hand in hand. As we've been working through this, these requirements include things like, developing brochures, updating our website, working with HOAs and the business community and, public meetings, things like that. A good example of this type of requirement or a best management practice related to this was our Stormwater Advisory Committee meetings that we had when we developed the stormwater utility. So we get to illicit discharge detection and elimination, or IDDE. You might hear that acronym from time to time. And this is a complete program that requires us to inspect different outfalls to make sure clean water is being discharged from our city to the state's waters, including Campen Creek and the Washougal River. So if we detect a problem or pollution, or if there are issues, then we're required to investigate and eliminate the source of the problem. Controlling runoff, it's just that, controlling erosion. Some of the best management practices for that include requiring, construction sites to put up silt fence, things like that. This could also include, requiring developments to construct retention facilities. We go to pollution prevention and control for operations. This is something we have to do in the field. These are the things that our crews do out there every day. Examples include street sweeping, cleaning catch basins. We even dechlorinate water when we flush our water system. So these are the things that are required. It might be something as easy as just covering a garbage container. Things like that. So just the small things that the crews do every day. A good example of a structural BMP, or best management practice, was the construction of our equipment facility, washing facility. And so we actually constructed a facility down there at the operations center. And now when we wash our trucks, our vehicles, our mowers, all that debris, oil, and grease that comes off the equipment, it goes through a settling basin and an oil water separator, and then it's discharged to the sewer system directly, and it doesn't get into the storm system. So OTAC, I'll just talk about them a little bit. OTAC Engineering, they have a lot of expertise with stormwater, and if it's the council's desire, we'd be very happy to have OTAC help us out. They've provided stormwater planning and MPDES permit services to many, many jurisdictions in our state, so they understand specifically the Washington State stormwater permit, Phase 1 and Phase 2. They've actually provided some input into the revised Western Washington hydrology model for Clark County as well. So they have a lot of experience, and we'd like to tap into that. So a few things that OTAC would help us out with include our G20 notification response. And that's basically a response letter to make sure that we stay in compliance with our permit and our permitting requirements. They'll help us out with our IDDE manual, and that's the Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination Manual. And that's a very large program component that we have, and it'll keep, it'll take substantial staff time to keep up with that every year. OTAC will provide us the required training for our staff. So this training has to be documented, and the documentation has to be submitted with our report every year. So that's an important component. And they'll help us out with our engineering standards as well, and with the stormwater management plan document. So I know this sounds, very onerous, but actually this update with OTAC will be helping us because it's going to help us lessen some of the requirements that we have. We have the goal in mind to maintain water quality, but also we don't want to do the things that are redundant or ineffective. And OTAC's expertise, I think they can look at our management program and help us out with that. So possible funding source. We have some good news to report. We recently received notification that we'll be receiving a $50,000 stormwater capacity grant from the Department of Ecology. And they'll be sending us that agreement soon, sometime this month. The grant will help us out with OTAC's expenses and other stormwater required programs. There's many program and permit requirements that will be coming down from the Phase 2 stormwater permit in the near future. So we're happy to get this funding source. So as it says there, facility construction is not eligible. There's a lot of, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, red tape, paperwork that goes along with complying with this permit. So that's what the award will cover. And lastly, there's some links here if anybody's interested in doing a little more research on their own. The last one there is our own City of Washougal Stormwater Department, and that's on our webpage. If you go into City of Washougal's webpage and go into the Stormwater Department, there's a lot of information there. If you want to look at our programs and see what we've been doing as far as capital facilities and things like that. And with that, just like to open it up for questions.
Are the stormwater regulations state or federal?
They actually come down from the federal government through the Clean Water Act, but each state has basically the state of Washington issues our permit, and it's a Phase 2 permit. Because what we have is state waters, and all the rain or the storm water that comes out of the sky and runs off our streets gets into the state waters, and we have to maintain a permit and comply with that permit for that discharge of water into the state's waters.
Is that the Department of Ecology?
That's correct.
David?
You say you're going to update the swamp document here, for lack of a better word. Whose standards are you using? DOE's?
Yes, it's tailored for our city, specifically the stormwater management program, but the requirements come directly from the permit. So we have a permit in place that we maintain, and
that permit incorporates federal standards too, I believe.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Jennifer?
Yes, the grant that you're receiving, what is it? I'm trying to find the slide.
It's a stormwater capacity grant.
Is that what it is?
Yes.
Yeah, here it is, Municipal Stormwater Capacity Grant.
Right.
So it's going to cover the PSA with OTAC for $23,948 basically is what it's covering, and then the extra is just going to be used, how did you say?
We have other program requirements that we'll be using some of that funding for. One of them is a underground injection control program. It sounds kind of crazy, but we have 150 dry wells in the city that we've identified, and those are basically big wells in the ground. So when you collect water from a catch basin, it's piped to a dry well, and that water goes into this deep hole in the ground, and it dissipates into the groundwater. So one of the requirements is to survey the area around that dry well to make sure that there's not pollutants or things that are going into that. So there may be a pre-treatment that's necessary. But it's a very large program, and each dry well has to, there's basically an analysis done on each dry well. So it's a substantial program requirement that's going to require a lot of time and effort, and we're hoping that some of these funds go towards that. There's also mapping requirement too that we can utilize some of these funds for, to map our storm system.
Other questions from council? Okay, so Jim, will we be bringing the PSA back next week?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Administration, David.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We have for your consideration next week what I believe will be the final iteration of an interlocal agreement with the City of Camas for how we mutually are represented with the CTRAN and RTC boards. This has gone through several iterations, as you know. At our last workshop on this, you expressed some concerns about some proposed revisions that they had. Those concerns were shared with Camas, and they've come back with what I believe is an excellent compromise for how we can move forward together. So I will just go over what has changed since the last time we saw this so that you can understand that. But really, this is a very straightforward and simple interlocal agreement. And effectively what it says is that we have an indefinite agreement, but one of the changes is that we will specifically mutually review the agreement to see how things are operating during the fourth quarter of 2013, so we'll give it a couple years basically. And toward the end of the second year, we'll take a look at it together and see if we need to make any adjustments. As you'll recall, we were originally looking at 3 or 4 year rotations with this possible automatic extension if someone was progressing through the chairs. That iterated down to a 2-year appointment. There's no longer an automatic, if you would, extension if someone is progressing through the chairs. However, by mutual agreement, the document provides that someone could be extended beyond 2 years, but it would be for mutual agreement. And then just to kind of shine a light on it, it doesn't make it automatic. It just points out the fact that one of the reasons for that could be that somebody is progressing through the chairs, but it could be for any reason. By mutual agreement, you could do something other than 2 years. Probably the key area where there had been some iteration on this issue was with respect to representation and removal in Roman numeral 5, and specifically in A, and how a representative would represent the consensus views or potentially the non-consensus views of our two communities, seeing that we are jointly represented. What the revised agreement essentially does is continues to require that a representative seek to fairly and accurately represent the consensus views of the two cities, but it recognizes, and looks to the representative to be creative in using a variety of ways to find that information and to understand what that consensus might be. But a representative is allowed to vote in the way that they believe that they should vote on any matter before the respective boards. When it is an item of significance, and I'll tell you what the definition of significance is proposed to be in a moment, but on items of significance, there's a little bit further requirement on the representative, and that further requirement is that you advise and seek guidance from both councils. I think that's fairly specific. You probably need to be going to a work session and engaging and potentially seeking action from the respective councils on an item of significance. Your advising capacity would be to explain the matter, explain the item of significance, what's going on, what are the issues, and then ask for guidance. If you see consensus from your councils, both of the councils on that item of significance, and you are part of that consensus, I think your vote and your role would be relatively straightforward, and that's not what we've been talking about. It's when there isn't consensus on those items of significance, and potentially where there might be markedly different views between the councils or amongst, in between the councils, on any individual council, for example, what should a representative do? And what this agreement says is that prior to casting their vote, the representative will explain all of that in a summary form to their respective colleagues on the boards, but then will vote in accordance with how they believe that they should vote on the matter, which I believe is reflective of the feedback that you gave, and that being a forced abstention if there wasn't consensus between the council was of significant concern for you. So our representative, our joint representative, will vote how they believe that they should vote, after having sought guidance, after having engaged with the councils. If it's evident that there's significant and marked difference in the perspectives of the councils or amongst members of individual councils, you report that in a summary format to your colleagues on the board, and then you vote as you see fit. The definition in here of items of significance are matters of taxation, formation of sub-districts, so we're getting pretty specific, understanding what the issues are going to be, particularly in front of the C-TRAN board. Constituent voting parameters, which is just getting at this whole issue about who's voting and when and all of that. And then generally, significant changes in the scope and nature of services that are delivered by these respective organizations. If something ever came up, I don't know exactly what that would be, but you never know, something significant could come up. And then any other items determined to be significant in the judgment of the representative. So in your capacity as a representative, you'd use that list and then your own judgment to inform when you would go formally and specifically in front of the two councils to get advice and seek to advise them of the matter and to seek guidance. Pursuant to what you had proposed the last time, if how you vote on these matters of significance, I would think that would be where the rub would be. If there was concern about that, whatever way that might go, there's this supermajority provision for removal, and that stays the same. And that's 10 votes out of 14 of the combined councils. So if you would imagine a combined council, you wouldn't be acting together or meeting together, although I suppose you could engage in a joint meeting. But if 10 of the 14 members voted to remove someone, then that person would be removed from their representative position. So those are the changes. It's kind of the compromise. I don't know if you call it autonomy, but the right of a representative to vote in accordance with what they believe is in the best interests of the communities is maintained. There is some accountability in terms of checking in and seeking guidance, which I think is healthy, that we're engaging as your colleagues, that you're sharing information with your colleagues on the C-TRAN or RTC board. With that, I'd answer any questions that you have. The idea would be that next week this will be for your approval, and that it would also be for Camus's approval next week. You've already made your tentative appointments to both C-TRAN as primary, Councilmember Freeman, and then for RTC, Councilmember McDaniel as the alternate. So that action's already been taken. And my expectation would be upon your approval next week, Camus will also approve this, and we can move on, and our representatives can begin their work more formally and with this resolved, which I think would be good.
John?
I just want to say thank you for all the parties involved in putting this together, and thank you for coming through on this, because it's something we've talked about for a year, and thank your counterparts and the other council members in Camus. I think this is a very fair document. Thank you.
Questions?
No. I'd also like to just say that I appreciate all the efforts. And can you hear me? Can't tell if it's on or not. I'd also like to get a little bit of input from Councilmember Freeman, since she will be representing us on the C-TRAN board, and kind of check with her and see if this is all fine and good and well.
From what I can see, it certainly does seem great improvement over how we first started out. Makes me wonder how things went in the past. For the last many years, I don't know what the rotation was, but I know Camus has been there for 4 years. And curious how it operated compared to how it will operate. I look at the fact that they meet monthly, and you get your packet approximately a week before that meeting. It's going to be interesting on how to get our council and Camus's council input, and then go to a meeting and cast that vote. We'll take it as it comes, though I'm certainly willing and capable of summarizing and presenting the issues. So I'm looking forward to it. Tomorrow night is another meeting, which Linda Dietzman from Camus will be sitting at the board, on the board. And so next month, we'll go to work on it. Thank you.
That notion of that time crunch is an excellent observation. I would imagine, I can't say this for certain, that the items of significance may have additional time frames available to you and all of your colleagues for consideration. There might be multiple workshops, and they'd be decisions of a significance that I think the community is anticipating. So hopefully you would have enough information from the staff there and enough time to engage your colleagues in a meaningful way. And we'll do everything we can from our end, and I'm sure Lloyd and his team would say the same, to assist you with that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. David Dunn, you've got another item, a professional services agreement for indigent defense services.
Yes, and I guess we'll call this a walk-on. And we indulge your patience, counsel, on this one, and we'll just pass this out, and then I'll come back and I'll walk you through it.
Thank you.
It might be in your technology, but I'm not sure.
It's not
Okay. So Mayor and Council, I'll talk about the timing and why we're doing it this way when I kind of get through the substance of this. What's before you, hopefully for your action and approval next week, is a professional services agreement with a public defender. As you may recall, I think we reported a while back, we were given notice by our current primary public defender that they were going to terminate out of our contract. They'd been providing services for some time, doing a fantastic job, but for various reasons needed to pull out of providing services for us. So Don and I, Don taking some lead, solicited interest from other qualified potential service providers, and Don and I interviewed 4 interested firms just this last Friday, and the holidays kind of got in the way, and that's part of the reason for this time crunch. We just didn't have this ready for you to get it fully into the agenda, and it was just this afternoon that we were able to have a conclusion and something to bring to you. So our apologies for the time crunch. The agreement is very straightforward. It's basically the same agreement that we've had with the previous service provider. It would run beginning next month and go through the end of January 2014, so it's a 2-year agreement. The monthly cost, it's a flat rate contract, is exactly the same as it has been in the past, so there's no increase in costs, which is good news. That $3,250 a month, and then a per jury trial case of $350. Not many of them go to jury trial, but if they do, there's a little bit additional work that the defender has to entail, so they there's that fee. This is a model that's used by some other communities. The firm that Don and I are recommending be engaged is the firm called Vancouver Defenders. They were one of probably two that we kind of put to the top of our list that were capable. They currently provide this service and have been providing it for a number of years for the city of Vancouver and for Clark County. And because of the volume of cases that they have there, they have a well-established team, multiple attorneys, and that was kind of what gave them an advantage in our mind, particularly in my mind. There are some changing rules coming down the pipe from the Supreme Court about the level of service that needs to be provided to these clients, and perhaps some more presence in the courtroom is going to be necessary in the early stages of some of the matters. And because Vancouver Defenders has at least 2 attorneys every day at the courthouse, they'll be readily available to service this. So for those reasons, our recommendation and the requested action next week will be to authorize the mayor to sign the professional service agreement with Vancouver Defenders. I made a little cross out here. Don reminded me after we had already prepared this that he had made some adjustments actually to the language. I had thought it's the identical contract language. Actually, Don tightened it up a little bit for our benefit, which is appreciated. Some of that had to do with the fact that there's some new rules coming down, and when those new rules come down, the contractor will comply with those new rules, and that's provided. I'll turn it over to Don just if he has any elaboration for you.
Yeah, I think that we had several interested parties that were very qualified. We felt that this outfit was the best qualified to handle our needs, and the cost would be the same as we've had for the last couple of years. So I think it's a go.
Don, what are the new requirements coming down?
I don't know all of them, but I know what some of them are going to be. Some of them are going to be that needs to be access to, the firm has to have access to an investigator. This firm has two investigators on staff. They have to have people available at certain times and places. They're entitled to have attorneys at all critical portions of the proceeding, and that's determined to be from first appearance on. That's one advantage of this outfit, is they have people at the courthouse all the time because of their work with the city of Vancouver and the county. Limits on the number of cases you can handle. You can't have somebody handling 1,000 cases. The quality is going to be diminished if you do that. So I think our numbers last year for our provider were about 250 appointments, just in the city of Vancouver, city of Washougal, if you can believe that.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, so it's a fairly significant little enterprise. It really comes down to about $150 per appointment. You know, if you're gonna retain an attorney, you know, that $150 doesn't get you very far, but doing it on a volume basis where they have somebody. The other thing that's kind of nice is they have an attorney that lives locally, I think in Camas. That's gonna be the one that's assigned to do it, so we'll have some knowledge of the local area.
Thank you.
Just a curiosity, do we ever have jury trials at our district court?
Oh, yes. Not here in Washougal.
No, that's what I meant. I meant at the Washougal court. No, thank you.
Nothing here, no. Not now, unless we went ahead and did our own court and did a municipal court and
Yeah, no,
our
I
own
was,
judge and all that stuff.
yeah, no, I was just curious, that's
No,
all.
we're not set up for it here.
That's a good reminder, Mayor and Council, that you recall a presentation with our police chiefs from Camas and Washougal. We're jointly dealing with the municipal court that we're looking at expanding that, and we work with the county on that and maybe doing our own thing. And all of the interested parties were aware of that and can accommodate us if that's what we do. So there's flexibility as well.
Other questions? There are 2 pieces of information I want to make sure that are out there as we go forward with this and your approvals or whatnot in regard to this PSA. First is Vancouver Defenders is owned by an individual that did work for Don's firm previously before forming his own corporation. And in fact, I believe Jeff used to handle our cases here in the city. So there's one piece where we've got a little bit of a tie-in. The other is Vancouver Defenders was actually an agency that I have used, a company that I've used, although the owners and I didn't realize that they were even in the running for this until last Friday. So there's another tie-in there as well. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that up front. So I think in the recommendations, from what I understand from your report earlier today, out of 4 individuals that came forward and answered the bid, 2 of them were basically one-person operations, 1 or 2-person operations. The other one is a 2-person operation. This one is dozens.
16 attorneys and 7 staff, I think.
And City of Vancouver just put it out and no one responded? Or Clark County?
I was doing reference check. I called a colleague in Vancouver who administers the public defender contract, and they just renewed with this firm for 5 years. But last fall, I believe it was, they went out with an RFP and received no respondents, including this firm.
And that's 6,000 cases a year?
I think that's what is pretty close to that.
6,000 cases a year in Vancouver for indigent clients. Yes, a significant volume, as you can imagine. Got some insights as to why that might be the case. One of them was it's a flat rate contract. Some of it might have been the ambiguity around the new rules coming down. Obviously, they've entered into an agreement with this firm, so they've renewed their relationship. I understand they have an automatic opener to open the contract back up when the new rules take effect. That wouldn't be, we would not be subject to that. That's probably because of the lower anticipated volume that we have. 280 compared to 6,000 is a very different scope. But that gives you some insight into my analysis of the candidates, what really set this firm apart in my mind from the other firm that I think could have done the job is the depth and scope of experience that they have providing this very service to thousands of citizens in Clark County over the years. Seemed to me that they would do a good job for us too, and our citizens who would need this service.
Other questions from council? Okay. We're now at that point on the agenda for a second round for anyone from the public that would wish to address council this evening. Richard?
Richard Hamby, 37015, excuse me, Southeast Gibson Road, Washougal. Very interested in the presentation on the Highway 14 planning improvements. I wish the presenter was still here because I've got a number of questions or comments that I would have liked to ask. Part of the presentation, he said that the task was to find both short and long-term solutions for the problems we've got there. And it seemed like the Ford Street extension maybe was the only thing on the list that really legitimately is much of an improvement that might be short-term. And it seems like something that really ought to go forward even as a standalone. It would certainly improve the traffic flow within the port area, and it would improve the situation that the mayor was talking about evening traffic sometimes unable to get off of Highway 14, because if you came across there and you saw that the left-hand turn lane was full, you could take a right and loop down around Ford Street and be right back in on the other side of the highway. So that seems like the most obvious thing that short-term could make some big improvements. The alternatives that were given, and I know they talked about maybe staged projects where something could be moved in stages, and it doesn't seem like there's any stages in anything that was talked about there, really. The 27th overpass that's been talked about for a long time probably is of little value without something to connect to. It seemed like alternative 6 really didn't provide that. It didn't provide much of any improvement for the problems at 32nd Street. It didn't do much for access to the port area. I understand it probably solves some of the problems or the concerns of WashDOT about safety at Washougal River Road intersection, which I acknowledge is really a concern. The alternative 8, if I understood it right, and this I would have liked to have been able to ask, but you kind of follow all the traffic paths. For instance, if I understood it right, if you were on Washougal River Road wanting to go east, you'd come south through the town on Washougal River Road, you'd go over Highway 14, get on a frontage road, go down to 27th, turn south on 27th and go down to Ford Street, then go east on Ford Street to 32nd, then go 32nd up to Highway 14 to a stop sign where you might be able to go east. And if that is the best we can come up with for a long-term solution, I'm really disappointed. I know that we've got, I really have concerns about the time frame that was suggested there. My understanding is that's very, very optimistic. I think those type of solutions with those kind of price tags really are long-term, probably farther out than that. So we're faced with kind of a conflict between needs and the money available. I mean, he mentioned that there was plans 20 years ago because the need was identified 20 years ago, and it's only increasing. So I guess the other question I'd like to know, it wasn't mentioned, but did they even consider roundabouts? I know the former council here was disapproving of roundabouts, but it seems like it would be a possible lower cost short-term solution. And I understand the concern about reduced speeds on Highway 14, but it should be safer. The reduced speeds, if nothing else, ought to allow for more points of connection for the city to a Highway 14, which is one of the problems that's being identified here. You get one point somewhere to get on and off, and that's all you get if you're going at highway speeds. So I'm going to follow this as it progresses, but I wasn't really very happy with the solutions that they found so far. Thank you.
And Richard, I think in answer to one of your questions, and I'm not completely certain, but because of the way they put their notes, I believe that alternative 2, alternative 2 had a roundabout at Washougal River Road, alternative 2. And their notes are, it was a fatal flaw due to Department of Transportation does not support, and City of Washougal citizens have shown lack of support. But identifies it as a roundabout.
It's not I mean, I know that WashDOT did approve it until our council pulled out of it, so I don't think it's a traffic issue. It's more of a public perception issue.
And don't know, because these are pretty brief, but from WashDOT's, the note on here, it just says WashDOT does not support. It doesn't say why or why not or any of that, so.
Anyway, I guess we don't have any real short-term solutions.
I would think that's an accurate statement at the moment. Any other members of the public wishing to address the council? Yes, Mike.
Good evening, council, mayor, staff. I'm Mike Reinhardt, 39521 Southeast Evergreen Boulevard, Washougal. I'd like to reiterate that it's going to be a long-term process, I would say, on Highway 14. I've been involved with Highway 14 for about 20 years. Councilman Greenlee was at most of the meetings on our last changes for Highway 14, which are the present ones. The 6-year plan was about 30 years ago when this was going to take place. So you don't need to really plan on 32nd Street, 27th Street as a final for probably at least 20 years, I would say, longer than that. Funds are one of the biggest problems. Other than that, all I can say is we can keep planning. 15th Street's going to be very important, more important than some people are realizing at this time, because going up the Washougal River, there won't be a lot more traffic, but 15th to 17th and over to where the county roads are for services, all of that land that you're going to be involved in the next 20 years will be very important to have that access. So that's something to really remember and to push on 15th Street, because that's probably going to be your next big item. 32nd Street, I don't know what the solution is, because we do know the railroad will continue to get a little busier. And I live on the railroad and I see more of it all of the time. So, thank you.
And you're not in a quiet zone either. Thank you, Mike. Any other members of the public? Okay. Going to Mayor's report, there was a request from Councilman Russell to discuss the seating arrangements of council and where council are on the dais. So open that up for any comments, suggestions.
I just wanted to mention that Councilmember Shoemaker asked if he could sit where he's now sitting so he could hear the mayor. He hears a little better out of that ear. And I said, that's fine with me. I have no problem with that. I would love to accommodate him. That's all.
You wanted to hear me more? Yeah, I didn't think so. Dave?
Actually, Paul, thanks very much for accommodating that. What I was trying to do was to get everybody to my right ear. And I've now got 5 people to my right ear. These folks over here, I've got a pretty good idea how they think, so I'm not worried about that. But this group down here, I need to hear from. Thank you for your consideration.
I only brought it up because I think I've been sitting down here for like 6 years. And so I was thinking of making a migration that way. So if anyone's open for changing, it would be nice to have a change of perspective on that side. So
I don't know, I've been here 2 days now. I don't know if I can handle the change.
You're going to fit in. All right.
I'm good with it, John. We can just swap.
Any other comments, thoughts? Anybody care? I know a year ago, well, 2 years ago, the only thing that we had really done is try to put things back into just numerical order by the seats you're in from 1 to 7. So whether it's 1 to 7, 1 to 7, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me where you're sitting, so. Do we want to flip for the next meeting? And some of you, well, virtually everybody will get a little bit of a change of scenery.
I like my seat fine.
I like mine. Well, mine's not in there, is it?
Well, probably we can just discuss it in private. I don't know if it's necessarily anything we can do now.
Take up
I just don't
meeting
want to
time.
surprise anybody at a meeting and have you come in and your nameplates are in a different spot and nobody knows where I am.
Well, we'll give you a heads up if any of us change.
Okay.
Well, it did seem odd when I was out there that the roll call started with number 7. I'm one of those really, in the box, stay in the box. It's like, wait a minute. And when you read, I'm also a teacher, so when you read, it's from left to right. So why did we start with 7 on this left from the audience? So I could see it, but it's just a little input. I actually sat there and considered it, it kind of distracted me the first few times.
Okay. In regards to the discussion, the presentation we had tonight on Highway 14, one of the things I want to get our staff and some of the representatives of the port and WashDOT together is I want to make sure that we're going through and kind of refining this. I can see, one, I believe Parsons Brinkerhoff did pretty much exactly what we asked him to do to get this thing started, and certainly with the limited amount of dollars that we spent between the port and the city. Now I think it's taking that information, and certainly I think they've gleaned some excellent comments and at least a thought process, you can call it good, bad, or otherwise, from WashDOT on where they're prepared to go and why. But I think from an administration standpoint, we want to kind of push that envelope a little bit farther and make sure that we truly are doing what we need to do, and almost taking the stance that we're probably going to get one shot at trying to get some funding for this corridor, if you will, and not wanting to chop it into additional pieces. So while I don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, I want to make sure if we're going out and we're making the attempt to try and get some cooperation, some dollars, some different funding mechanisms put together, that we're looking at the entire thing to try and get it cobbled together. I don't know how, and one of my questions for WashDOT is, I don't know how aware they are of our employment center that is, you know, destined to be up on top of Mount Norway, coming off of that 27th and 32nd, and what that could mean with the hundreds of acres of property that are up there, and what that can develop into, and all of those type of things. So I want to make sure that we're all operating off of the same viewpoint going forward. I certainly agree with Mike and Richard that this thing is still a long ways away, but if we're going to try and do some full court presses, which I think a few years ago, the two cities went together and did that, and did some significant lobbying, both on the state and the congressional level, to get the funding that we've got now. And until those really started taking it to that level and did not let up on that message, some of that funding started to come through, and then it was like the trickle turned into a waterfall. I'm optimistic that we might get some sympathetic ears, whether there's funding or not, and then hopefully as funds do start becoming available. So it may still be another 20 years. My intention is to put as much effort into it as we can to try and turn that 20 years into a 2-year window, a 4-year window, a 6-year window, even if we have to start staging some of it in for available dollars that somebody is able to get into funding cycles somewhere. But I'm not going to be satisfied that we're going to be waiting 20 years to try and get that thing funded. So just so council's aware of some pushing that's going to happen from our doors. David.
Can we support you on that?
Sure, happy to.
I mean, anything we can do, let us know.
It's going to take I hate to liken anything we've got going out here to the Columbia River crossing. It's going to take a unified voice. I don't believe that at our state level or at the federal level, they're going to want to hear anything more coming from Southwest Washington. Well, we think we want this, but maybe we want this, or until we've got our act together, until we're a unified voice between, and it's going to come down to the port and the city. I would have a strong belief that we will get support from the city of Camas as well, just as we've supported the efforts on the western side that has at least got this started, that we're going to get support from them as well of finishing this corridor, since it truly it services the entire eastern end of the community. So
finishes off the project.
hopefully, you know,
once happened all in one fell swoop this time around.
And if we can get Mike a quiet zone out there at his crossing on the railroad, then we'll let Skamania County worry about when it gets to the county line at that point. So, David, any other items from yourself? Okay. Council? Paul?
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say I have accumulated everyone's desires for committee appointments, put them on here, and if there's things on here that don't match up, or you don't, maybe you decide you don't want to be a part of it, or maybe you wanted to serve on something but you're not, just bring it to the next meeting if that's all right. Just talk about it, or we can even talk about it. You know, give me a call, or Jennifer, or Sean, and then we can work on trying to get those arrangements made. But I tried to do the best I could, getting everyone and kind of what I felt was, you know, kind of like where you were going, Joyce, with what do you want to be involved in, and so forth. So anyway, so I'll pass these down, and I should need
Rose, can you try and get in touch with John and Jennifer and make sure that we get a committee assignments committee meeting appointments committee meeting set up so that we can get this stuff moving forward? And if we can, in the next week. Because after that, my schedule for the 2 or 3 weeks after that is going to be pretty limited. Other items from council? Paul?
This transportation thing obviously bugs me. I went and sat through an entire day-long meeting with the Washington State Transportation Commission, which was actually held at the Port of Vancouver. And I need to be careful here that I don't pick any fights, but we have some experience that there is something of a disconnect between the priorities of our local WSDOT officials and the priorities of WSDOT in Olympia. I don't want to get into any private conversations, but for example, 2 years ago, the legislature changed the list of priorities for the transportation system. The new #1 priority is economic vitality. I think somebody should notify our local WSDOT Southwest region that that's the case. I don't know what to say other than that. Other than that, I will be up bright and early to be at the Columbian and Vancouver Chamber of Commerce breakfast bright and early at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning for the economic forecast. This is an annual event, and the speaker this year, well, I think will, because I'm a bit of a wonk on the subject, be particularly interesting, is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank in San Francisco. And the Federal Reserve is the largest employer of professional economists in the world. They spend a lot of time and a lot of effort trying to figure out projections and plans and all kinds of things. And the 10th district has, or San Francisco has particular areas of expertise. So I hope to learn a lot and try and bring things back here.
Other items, Connie Jo?
Seeing that I am the C-Tran representative for Washougal and Camas, I know there's a lot of history, and I'm not aware of most of it. And I'd like to know where our council, how our council feels about some specific issues, you know, that C-Tran's involved with. And will there be a time where I can have an opportunity to be brought up to speed on where you guys have been in the past? Or will that just be through research?
I would think, yes. Great question. I would think if I were in your shoes, probably the first places I would go would be Jeff Ham over at C-Tran to try and get a good idea of those items that have affected the East County, where they've been looking for conversation back and forth and or what the routing is, what it isn't, because it's different in Washougal than it is in Camas. And then also pick Linda's brain as well on what she's come up against. You know, we could certainly try and pull some items together as far as anything that has been, that we can find that has been in the public discussion in regards to public transportation in the area.
Well, I know that
no matter what, it's going to be kind of cobbled together and going from there, because it's also, you know, as you know from your from the presentations on Saturday on open public meetings. I mean, it's not something where you can even sit down necessarily one-on-one with council members and ask them what they think about this stuff. We could certainly bring it to workshops and that type of stuff as
That's what I was
you
hoping.
come up with information or things you want to bring forward or clarify or any of that type of stuff.
So I've already been to their retreat and to one other monthly meeting, and I know that they've got some priorities that they want to hit hard.
Well, and I think it would be very helpful for both councils, certainly this one, and because we meet at the same times, I don't know what presentations Councilmember Dietzman has made to the Camas Council, but I'd be interested in knowing what the 5-year plans are for C-Tran out in this area, and you know, are there changes projected? Are there, you know, deviations from what the routing is, or any of that type of stuff? And I'm sure that, well, I know that at least Mayor Higgins has some ideas of what he'd like to see over in his community. We actually enjoy more service than what the city of Camas enjoys, even with their employment centers up there on the hills. So,
My observation is that they're very involved in decisions for light rail, for being involved with the Columbia River crossing. All of those things are a lot of things that pertain to Vancouver that wouldn't even affect our service, but would affect taxation and those types of things. So
yeah,
those are the things that I would be presenting.
Yeah, I don't know that I would preclude the fact that it could affect our service. It all depends on how things go. You know, for me, Columbia River crossing and light rail, all of those things tied together are just the big gorilla in the room that is one specific project. There's a whole rest of the county to be served by transit that is still a going concern every single day of the year for us. So, yeah, I have family members that utilize mass transit going into downtown Portland every single day. So, you know, even those things out here, they go to the west to catch it and go from there, and then they drive themselves back home again from wherever they started from. So, it all has an effect to us no matter what. Funding wise, could still have an effect to us. So, Paul?
Just one thing, and if you mention this, I'm sure Mr. Ham will know immediately from whose mouth it came. One of the things that's always kind of bugged me about the way that they do routes is they go up and back the same route, pretty much. Now they've split the route a little bit in Washougal, but you're taking a very large, very heavy piece of equipment and you go up and back. If you would split that route so that the two pieces are 3/4 of a mile apart, you essentially double the number of people who have access to the route. One of the other things that I've talked to him about is, especially out here, one of the problems is that people live up Woodburn Hill or they live up Sunset Ridge. How do you get public transportation down to Safeway or down to the center of the city? It really makes a lot more sense to me, and on a service orientation, that if you're going to run big, heavy pieces of equipment, you run them at kind of mini transit centers, one out at the end of Addy, one downtown Washougal, one, I don't know, but maybe a half a dozen of them through Camas. But then you run much smaller equipment on the order of C-Van equipment in loops that bring people to those central points. That would serve a much larger community than this kind of big bus up and back model.
Feedback already. Other items from council? David?
Mr. Mayor, I've got 4 priorities I'd like to see come forward for workshops in the near future. And I think Dave's got a couple of these already on his agenda there. One of them is council rules. Another is E-Verify. Third one's the mission statement. And the last one I haven't seen for a while, since the last time we met with Paul Dennis in October. The the SUITA contract evaluation standards.
I missed your number 3.
E-Verify.
I had E-Verify as number 2.
SUITA?
Mission statement.
Mission statement, there you go.
Gotcha. And then SUITA deliverables, basically?
Yes. Yeah, actually, it's more the standards for evaluating how we determine if they're successful.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
You bet. Other items? Seeing none, we're adjourned. One note, next week, we are not meeting on Monday, we meet on Tuesday, correct? Yep. We have a holiday, just so council knows, City Hall is closed on Monday, so.
I didn't want to bring that up until I talked with you and the staff. But the staff are doing some of this work, but these plans like swamp.
On these ones, certainly ask Jim directly or John Rock, since he